Yep, the weatherman has given us the shaft again. Still raining. Well, I was going to just use the day to get some work done on a 90 ship.
Oh, it's been a while since we worked on a 90 ship. Last time we did, we roughed out, got a totally rough cut, so we could start thinking about how we want to finish up the canopy shape. Worked pretty close to the drawing that Gerald Champ had sent. Now I did a couple of things. Plugged up the exhaust with some tissue, of course, some wet tissue. Plug up the venturi because we're going to be carving and sanding. I wanted to revisit this. I wanted to look at how I just made a little balsa block for under the spinner. What I want to do is cover the spinner with tape, of course, so I can run a sanding block in here a few times, get some of that shape done. I don't want to destroy the paint on here. And I can just de-stickize the tape to do that. That's one of the things. I wanted to look at roughing out how I want to make this cowling, the scooping. I wanted to make it very similar to the Spitfires and Strega, where there's a big oval opening. So there's no chance we're going to be short on air going in there. And I looked at a lot of different ways of doing it. I wanted to kind of look at this from a lot of different angles before I start cutting wood. But before I make any serious decisions, this is always a good idea. A nice big cup of Javalia coffee. Ramo Javalia. Now I had originally started this whole idea with the idea I was going to try to do something similar to the Testarossa and have a big wide scoop up here, but I kind of abandoned that, and I wanted to, and I think part of it is because of flying Strega, and I like the way that looks from inside the circle. If you've flown a Strega type or a, let's say a Spitfire type, I guess is a better, you notice it gives a very accentuated point. And I thought there's a reason for doing it, because we have a short nose. If I was to put a blunt nose spinner on this, it's going to look like a bulldog or something. And I want it to look more like in the keeping. And the ultimate goal is that nobody will even notice that it doesn't have a normal nose moment arm, because remember, this is a relatively heavy engine. So the first thing is going to be to just get some, I don't know, some look at how I want to lay out the blocks on this, and of course what blocks are available. Always it's a big thing because there's not much available here. Now I always like to, I wet tissue up and make sure because I don't want to get dust down in there as I'm carving and sanding. And I'll never forget the one time I had done this on a Super Tiger 60 muffler. I had plugged a muffler up, and actually Bill Rich has done it too, and forgot that tissue was in there, went out to the flying field, and kind of like Les when we forgot to cut the hole for the header. But I want to make sure, we're not going to be flying the 90 now for a while, because I want to be working on basically I want to work on the front end of this fuselage in this rainy spell that we seem to have run into here. In fact, I was thinking about making up a dedicated spinner from one of the rejects that had no prop holes, but for right now I don't want to waste that time doing it. I'm just going to cover the spinner with tape so I can start carving. Now we have to take a couple things into account here. I know I want to take this down to exactly where the spinner is, but for right now, I'll keep it the thickness of the piece of tape extra. The one thing I'd like not to have or minimize is that I have a negative reflex here that I have to fill with either epoxy light or whatever. But I want to at least start with the thickness of a piece of tape right on the edge there, and I'm not worried about the spinner fit right now. That back plate fit is not a concern at all. I've rubbed this tape up on my shirt so it isn't super sticky. I don't want to hopefully not pull the paint off of this. This is the spare for the Testarossa. And I remember many times I'd not cover the spinner, say, oh, I'll just be careful, and I wound up scratching up a really good spinner. Now, in the case of these, we'll make one of these cones just a spare, or one that has a little molding defect in it. A lot of them have little bubbles and stuff in it that we can sacrifice it, because I want to get this contour. And part of the design feature of this plane is this nose section. And the philosophy is, because it's short, I have to make it look as pointy as possible in keeping with the look that I'm after here. Now, again, I had thought about other things and other scoops, and after flying this off for about 10 gallons of fuel, the one thing that jumped out at me was I'm using the same spinner, same cowl shape, and in flight it makes the nose look longer than it really is. So I wanted to kind of incorporate that on here as one of the design features. See, when I originally envisioned this, I was thinking big scoop, and see how thick that nose looks? What happens when you shorten it, the aspect ratio changes dramatically. It changes by 10%. So that the ARF Strega really taught me a, well, relearned is a better word, a little lesson in how to cheat something. Now we're going to run into the same problem with the 90s Spitfire. We're going to run into the fact that it's very short, and now, you know, if you accept the fact, yeah, it'll look very short as part of your what you accept out of the project, but I don't want it. I want it to look traditional in a lot of ways that I don't want to trade away. I don't want to have it look like a I don't know, a bulldog, I guess is the right word. And what's happened in the past when I've made, and this is a year that I made two planes exactly the same, but one has a shorter nose. I didn't like the shorter nose look. I much preferred having the nose look a little bit longer and pointier. Here's a plane that had a short nose, and I never liked that. I never liked the way that plane looked from inside the circle. Now here's another lesson in a long nose, the big canopy. This look, I thought, looked exceptional from inside the circle. It really looked good. Again, all subjective, but this is one of the things I want to do early on in this. I don't want to right now lose sight of what my vision on this design is. And certainly one of my personal favorites, Walt Praise. That's a really, but it's a long nose. But it was the original Strega that when I made that cowl, that Strega type cowl, and in our club that was the traditional way to make it. I right away noticed, ooh, the nose looked great, and when you make a hard corner, it really accented it. Now, I don't know if we're going to be successful with this shape that I envisioned, but the first thing here is I need to kind of look at this. Step one here is to get out the sanding block and get this dressed into the spinner shape. And that's difficult because this is a wider motor, so we really have a lot of carving and sanding, and I want to get it roughed in. The final roughing in today. Now usually I can pick up, and in this case it's the motor mount that's the offending thing here, and a really rough piece of sandpaper, and I can just work that motor mount. And actually I've gone so far as to see the blind nuts coming through. So I need to get that, what amounts to be the hard spot, a little bit lower here, even if I go down into the blind nut a little bit. And I don't know if at some point in this design we're going to put some kind of a blister here, a valve cover, some exhaust. But for right now, just to get this as smooth as possible would be that would be step one of this. And one of the things I may try to do, and I was just thinking of maybe a little bit better way to do this than what I'm doing, would be to undersize the wood and then get a couple layers of half-ounce glass after the top block is installed, to avoid those cracks. There's always those lines and cracks come right around here. So one of the choices, of course, will make some kind of scoop here or something, but I still want to start with having all the choices. And I want to start, and what I thought of doing is I'm trying to hold the sanding block so it just touches the spinner, but it doesn't go over it. And I'm trying to look at it from a lot of different angles here. I tried taking a little bit off with a Dremel tool, but it's just too hard to control it, because you're going into, in this case, you're going into hardwood and softwood. One of the real bugaboos always to get a flat surface. Once this is joined permanently, we can CA this and then get a better joint. But to get all the roughing done and to look at it from as many angles as possible while I'm doing this. See, I'm trying not to go out over the spinner, but yet to keep that contour. Again, that contour, and on the Testarossa, I really liked the way that came out. That was one of the defining things that I really liked. But again, I think for our purposes, because we've cut so far into the motor mounts here, it's really going to be a smarter thing is to undersize it and get some fiberglass cloth up where my hand is, some extra. We'll probably fiberglass the whole nose, but the issue is that this comes a much wider than normal fuselage, comes to the same spinner, so you have that severe taper. And I think it's going to look real nice when it's done, but it's going to be, well, I'm going to pretty much devote the rest of the day just to dressing in this nose, because what happens is once you have it roughed in and it's got that nice shape, then you glass it, and you're glassing and sanding. I'll put that last little bit sanded into the glass so it'll all be hard. Right now it's hard, soft, hard, soft, hard, soft. It's hard to get a smooth, when you rub your hand over that, get a smooth contour. Now I've got this relatively close to what I can picture, but to get the last little bit off, and I decided I really would do this, I want to undersize this and get this last, like a little nose ring of fiberglass when I'm done, just to reinforce this, because I've really cut into the motor mounts here, and I don't want to, another thing too, when you're starting the engine, I don't want to have those, several people I've seen have a beautiful nose and then all kind of fingerprints from squeezing it and the motor pops, and that's, when you're making a plane red or yellow or a color that you're going to see that, especially right up here, it just jumps right out at you. So the next step on this is to take the spinner and the tape off and just put an ink marker around here and undersize it the thickness of what I guess some 1/2-inch fiberglass would be. The easiest way I know to do this is just mark this, and you can see it's a little rough. And just sand this until we get this and when that ink is almost gone, we'll be undersized about the thickness of, well, I hope some 1/2-ounce fiberglass. Now usually I got to do this kind of by eye and by feel, and if I can get it accurate, needless to say, it's when this is in permanently, it'll be a lot easier to get this permanent joint. It's very difficult right now to get this roughed in because we got hard, soft, hard, soft. At some point in time, this will all be hardened with thin CA fiberglass, and a lot easier. I can put on a dummy spinner and just grind right into it. Now I know some people never see this, but I see it. When I'm flying a plane, I can always see if this contour is real nice. I don't know why. Maybe because while I'm flying, I'm focusing in on a spinner. And I'm not sure that's why, but getting a nice contour here, a little bit undersized. That'll be the goal of this session. And we're just going to block sand it until we get down to bare wood. Well, the way this worked out, this is totally undersized now by what I hope is the correct amount. The next step, and we're not going to have time in this session to do it, next step is going to be to lay out the cowl block. Anyway, in one session I hope we've got this, and it's very time consuming. It just, I think if you skimp at this point later on and you start sanding a silver and you find a high spot, just not worth it. This was a good expenditure of time on this. Nothing more fun than getting a box from Richard Oliver. And I think I know what's in here. We're going to have another header to test. Only poor Richard's got flying weather and I don't, so oh, K2R. This, he had told me he was sending some of this up. Now, and we're going to show how to use this. This is used to clean a monocoque model. Now, we found out another really important thing. Never use Sikkens M6. Sikkens M600 turns the monocoque clear. Forget Sikkens M600 for cleaning. This is what you use to clean a monocoque model. And you can get it right from Rich Oliver. So I knew about that. What I'm looking for is the header. Now he's made a the idea of this header, this is see, we've been in the evolutionary process, and you know how many we've had. I think we're over 10 now. This one has a bend in it. It has a much different baffling system in here. Totally different. You can see the little pinholes in there. And this is our next give it a try one that you should need, or hopefully not going to need, a rubber thing on there. I'll make up a gasket for this today and get that on the model as soon as possible. Yeah, that looks pretty cool. Now, this is another thing that Rich Oliver makes, and it's used basically for drilling your motor mount holes. Very, very handy. Les has one, and Les I think has it at his shop because I couldn't find it. And I think he has it for the 40. This is the one for the bigger block engine. Now I had a little time this afternoon to make up a two-bladed spinner, since we've been basically using 14.5 rev-ups. And I got one of the 14.5s that we had for the Testarossa that basically just has some black Brodac dope on it. But I need to swap the header out now. We're going to hopefully get out tomorrow or the next day and get, well, every time I get one of these exhausts from Richard Oliver, it's a little bit of an upgrade. So usually we're just looking to test and put data in a database. And the last time we ran tests, this was the little muffler that I made up on a lathe. And I took Richard's, the 90 size, the little rubber. And the thing I didn't like about this, well, Brian picked up on it right away. The rubber distorted the sound some and made it sound a little bit like, oh, I don't know, a sound. He clearly, and I did too, liked the sound of the no rubber exhaust system. Let's just leave it at that. So let's pull this apart. May have to do a little chopping and channeling here to get Richard's exhaust in, but that's what's nice about having an ARF. And one thing I really like about this Rojet setup is absolutely nothing gets oily in here. This stays as dry as a bone. Now this setup left a little more oil on the plane. That was one of the downsides. By having a longer rubber, less oil got on a plane. The one with the straight pipe going 90 degrees to the header left almost no oil. But either way, we're talking about a very little bit. It's nothing like when you have a side exhaust engine and you have to deal with that action. So next step, make a gasket, convert the header. Well, one of the things I like about working on this ARF, first of all, the snap comes right apart when I replace a part like the exhaust. This is the critical thing, is I have to get the longer size, the longer length bolts. These are special bolts that go with this header with the machined flange. Richard's header, I need to have the longer bolts. So this is a critical thing. If you put a machined flange header on, the bolts go into the case too far and you can hurt the liner. So one thing to keep in mind, the bolts and the header go hand in hand, and we've discussed that on previous DVDs. Now every time I'm done testing a header, I enter all the data in the database. In this case I got the screws that match this header that relate to this thickness. This is all ready to put on if we want to do any further testing, we want to do anything else. This is a package that's ready to bolt on. Again, it's on a previous video that we showed how to determine if the bolts are the right length. In this case, because we have extras. And because we have the gasket on this piece, it's very convenient. It doesn't come off with the header. But the trick is to torque these down each side just a little bit. And always remember, Rojets are 540 screws, not 440. Even though a 440 will go in there, what happens is you're going to basically have a loose thread very soon. I tighten these up each side just a little bit, the same way you'd put a head on an engine. Now this exhaust has a unique baffling system. It's totally unique, totally different than anything else we've tested. So this will be a very interesting test. And whenever I'm going to do anything like that, the first thing I do, if I'm going to change exhaust systems, change Venturis, richen up the motor for the next flight. So if anything, if we're wrong on the first flight, let it be wrong rich, not lean. That does have a nice, well, we got to do maybe a little cutting to get this in the plane now. Kind of a cool look. Yep, got to get the phone. It is basically is going to be a drop-in. And if you can see, I don't even have to do any dremeling. This kind of sticks out. Should get almost all of the oil off of the plane in one stroke of the pen. Actually, it's even totally overkill. That couldn't be better. Now, of course, the big thing is, how does it affect the fuel economy? Do we need to change our tuning, compression, and venturi? And to do that, we need weather. That actually worked out to be a pretty easy retrofit. And again, the considerations are the back pressure on the engine, the noise, the weight, the ability to keep the oil off the plane, especially in a monocoque plane. But again, we're going to be using KR2 or K2R to clean from this point on. And I'm hoping, you know, like I said, don't put M600. Prepsol I don't think takes it off. M600's a little bit stronger. We're certainly going to see once we get some weather. Again, it's not going to happen today, and I hope tomorrow is going to be a little bit better than today. Well, we're going to head out to the field. I called Rich Oliver this morning and I say, you know, Rich, the wind is howling, the flag is blowing. It's 28 degrees, and you know what he says? Get out there and test that header. We'll try to get at least one flight on that header today. We're going to need in the next couple days to start dealing with those scoops on the side of the fuselage of the 90 ship. But again, we got more than one project going at once here. There's vets everywhere here. Songbirds, they're seagulls. And there's ice everywhere. Hey guys, I want to fly today. Oh yeah, that's ice. That is solid ice. Now listen, if this was anybody but Rich Oliver or John Brodak, you could just forget this. Look at that ice. Solid ice. Ugh. This is when you really start to separate the men from the boys. The Minnesota Vikings from the Miami Dolphins. Look at these penguins. Look at this solid ice. Look at that ice. Look at these two guys. March of the Penguin. Now there's only 2 seagulls and me out at the flying field. What's wrong with this picture? What's wrong? Here's what's wrong is out where the stooge and the handle is, it's icy. So I got to be really careful not to go backing up, wandering around or whatever. Look, these things blew over already. Wind's already howling. Now, one of the hardest things to do on and I've really found this to be true, and this is not funny, is the dirt and oil that usually accumulate on the lines in warmer weather and cold weather turns to jello, STP or something here. Here's the problem in cold weather too. Sometimes those lines do get sticky, so. And boy, that cold alcohol on your bare hands always, oh boy, what am I doing here? Rich Oliver, I want to move to Houston. We got air density up almost at 100 this morning. Temperature below freezing. I like the way that header looks. Now, the only problem is, well, it's not really a problem. It's going to get oil all over the stooge, maybe. I don't know. I guess that's not a real problem. We got a 2-bladed cone on there at last, and I painted up this is one of the painted 14.5 rev-ups just for this test. Well, we got a rich flight, which is what I wanted. I didn't want to take I didn't want to, anytime I do a change, especially an exhaust pipe change, I don't want to run any risk that first run is a lean run. Now, I'm not sure we're going to get any tripod flights today for Richard, but boy, this is brutal. This is brutal. Oliver, you owe me. Anyway, this showed, it has a nice sound, by the way.
And I've got even a better way. I think I can make one of these that the back comes apart and becomes like a gun silencer. I'll detail that out when I talk to Rich. See if he can if he wants to try that, or if he's got a spare one we can cut up. But this one of the nice things is there's no oil at all on a plane after a flight. This is for all purposes like a tune pipe, and actually it doesn't look offensive while you're flying. It doesn't stick down or whatever, any more than what I would be used to anyway. Ha! Minnesota Vikings stung. As we get flight after flight, this header looks like it's very promising. Very promising. It's got a nice sound. There's no oil on a plane. And like I said, I think I have an idea that Richard could try. Or I can cut this one up probably. We'll see what he says. I got the other camera running, but I'm not sure what I'm doing here. I'm spinning around in unflyable air here. And when it gets like this, where it's really bumpy and rock and rolly, this field gets very hawky up top because the air comes over these tall buildings, and basically we don't want to lose the ARF, so we're not getting too cute. But we'll see if any of those flights have any merit. I noticed one thing about this. This may sound like a small item, but it's not. With the black spinner on the plane, I'm going to paint the spinner white because you can't see the spinner. The spinner kind of disappears and makes the plane look shorter, and I'm always looking at the spinner while I'm flying. So, right, we're almost up here. We've been sneaking up on a needle to where the motor's going to be running 2.4. So, one more, and then we'll see what we get off the tripod. Now I would rate today as a survival day, and I'm going to see if we got any of the flights off of the other camera. Sometimes this can be very interesting, but it's brutal out here. These are really brutal conditions. I call this survival conditions, and probably there'll probably be a contest somewhere in my lifetime that, look at this seagull. Hey. Just when I thought it was safe to put in some more flights. Okay, Richard, my friend, it is so cold out here you can't believe it. This is your header that has the little gun silencer on the end. We are freezing. It's so cold even the birds aren't out here today. But we're going to get at least, hopefully, this is survival conditions. This is not let's go flying for fun. This is try to keep your nose, the drool from my nose is getting me down. But I'm learning stuff, and I think this header has a lot of potential. I'll know more when I get a few more flights on it. But the conditions here, air density about 98, temperature way below freezing, definitely ice everywhere. So let's just see if we can get through some unflyable flights here. Believe me, nobody else will be joining me today. I don't know what. And good, thank God I brought that coffee. Without that coffee, I'd be dying. I'm dying with the coffee. Now the reason I wanted to leave that whole flight, including the landing, because every once in a while, in the last couple of nights, we had these, what I call survival days, where you just have to get a stunt pattern in. Well, Warren would already have called off the contest, but you can still get a stunt pattern in with that setup, with that motor, with that prop, that header, and for sure, what I was hoping wouldn't happen is some part on the plane would fail. But and you can see even on the landing, it's going this way and that way, and turns into a rock star. But anyway, we're packing it in. My nose is so cold I can't feel the stuff dripping off of it. Woo! I'm done. I'm really done. I hope I get at least one of these flights on the tape so you can have a good laugh. That is what a survival flight is like, and that is what some of the times the objective today was to test that header. If we didn't do a survival flight, we'd be postponing and postponing. Maybe it'll snow tomorrow. See, around here, this could turn into Colorado any minute. I feel like we accomplished something, but boy, am I cold. I am going to run home, jump in a hot shower, and start, just turn the heat up. I don't care what it costs. Money is no object. I really have to paint that spinner white or chrome or something, or red. I never realized how critical that is when you can't see. I guess I'm brainwashed. So we got a little maintenance to do on a plane, paint the spinner. That prop's working fine for survival, but most of all we need heat, big heat. Now once we get home, this is the magic. When you're cold, that's the ticket to longevity. The thermos, the coffee. Drink a thermos of coffee, then drink a thermos in the shop. And we're going to go see if we can get anything accomplished today. Maybe get that spinner painted or whatever. Now I just put a quick and dirty white finish on that spinner just so I can see it during maneuvers. Boy, is that something I learned today. Black spinners don't make it. I don't know. So, not for me anyway. I guess I'm addicted to seeing them a different color. Well, we got this out of the way. I want to lay out my cowl blocks for the 90. Now that that's ready for, assuming we get a test day later in a week, I want to start working on the 90 a little bit. Alright, the next thing I want to do is get my blocks. I'm pretty satisfied with the way this worked out. I'll start at the front. The easiest way I know of to do this kind of a thing is to start with the front block. I need to measure out exactly where the motor is going to go, and the block is going to end at what amounts to be the bulkhead here. So I'll actually have to do this in two pieces. Now the first thing I want to do is I want to measure out, lay out a, let's see how I can do this easily. I want an exact area where the glow plug is going to be. Okay, now I can take the engine out and I can start angling this front block. I need to get that angle off on the bandsaw. Now I want to look at which side of this block has the best grain. It looks like this side is the one I want to do. And rather than setting up the bandsaw, I'll just grind that angle in. I want to get that angle as the first thing. That has, in other words, the way you lay out, it's the same as making an exhaust pipe for a motorcycle. You start at one end and start connecting. If you put this block in first, now you got to get both angles at once. So if you start at one end and you work your way back, I think it's the easiest way to do this. What I'm doing is fine-tuning this, adding a little angle at a time. Until I get the exact angle, it's going to fit right into that spinner. A little bit more. Now I can just go back to the belt sander until I get this angle, and I think I've got, yeah, it's a little bit too much angle now. I want to get this a nice, that's fit one. I have to get that angle fit one. Sometimes you have to do this many times. We're sneaking up on it. Very close, just one more kiss with the, oh, just ever so little. And we'll have that angle as our first angle. So now I have this angle. Now I pretty much can hold this in place. I know two things. This is going to be a 1-inch block, so I'll leave a little bit extra on there to start with. And I can just rough out that cut. What I can do, I can get a chunk of this material off. I just can leave a little extra on here for now. And I
some of this off, just easier to cut some of it off. Saves a little dust in the shop. And the rest of that angle, I can just go over to the belt sander and take the rest of that off for now. And little by little, I want to make this block, get rid of as much extra material. The material I don't really need, because I don't want to have all that carving and everything to have to do. Now it's this last little bit. Take some of this off, leave it a little oversized. Wouldn't hurt, that's for sure. The thing is, any material I can get off now, just all that dust that you make when you're sanding and carving, now I need to get the top shape. Okay, now I have this roughed in. Now I can get the top. Let me center it. And I can trace around here and just get the top and get all this extra material on both sides, get rid of it. Now I can leave this a little bit oversized too, since we'll do the final grinding and sanding when we have the spinner in place. You can also pick up these angles and I'll just extend that line down, because this mostly is going to get removed, but it still gets me a lot of material off without even having to touch a knife blade. Just getting rid of that just makes it a lot easier, I think. Okay, now I know this can line up right with the spinner ring. I know we've got a little bit of extra material and certainly some extra length. Now I need to plot down here, and this may be a little bit of a, let's see how we can do this. This is where the glow plug in theory is going to be, very close to there. Now the reason I need to know where the glow plug is going to be, because I need to lay out this scoop. Okay, so that's, now I need to figure out roughly where the middle of this is going to be. Now I want to get a rough, well, we don't need to know, we need to know what the case is. It's not the head that we care about, it's the case. And that should give us a little bit of clearance over the case. And that's too tight, so we need to go with the middle dimension. See, because if you just measure the head, you're missing, you need to get it right under there. Okay, now this is important. In fact, I adjusted the center line already, but I'm close on this now. This is going to be where the motor, at least in theory, is going to exit through the block. So we know that has to come out. Now I also need to know roughly how far forward. Let's see if I get this. It's right here. Furthest forward is here. And I'm going to try to, well, let's go with one size bigger. This is just to rough it in. Now I would think that we're pretty close on, if you look at how those numbers got picked up, and that would be our minimum hole. Of course, we're going to adjust that a million times before this is done, but that's actually the part of it And I think realistically that's the part that's going to get taken out once this whole thing is laid out. And I'm going to try to figure out what the easiest way to get most of that out is. Now, if that's the nose piece, this is our scoop part. Now I need to get the back block laid out. See, the thing is, I'm trying to figure out a logical way that you can get a lot of this done, and then the final shaping and curving is easy. But if you start with just a block of wood and you start, just easier to do it this way, I think. We're going to find out. Okay, the next thing, I just tack glued this piece in place. Now, because I need to get this angle real accurate, I need to cut the block. I'll leave it oversized here. Get this angle nice and tight, make a permanent glue joint, because this is going to be one piece. And then back here, I need to be just a little bit oversized, and I'll trim that down to match the bulkhead. This will be part of my take apart feature. So in essence, I'll have this one piece. When I take that off, the muffler will be exposed. I can get in there and work on that hopefully pretty easily. Now you may think, well, why don't you just cut this piece first? But always think, when you do this kind of an assembly, front to back, because if you cut this piece and you need to adjust it, every time you adjust this angle, this piece is going to get shorter and shorter. So the most important thing, leave this oversized by plenty. In fact, I'm not even going to cut it until I get this angle, and I'll do that the same as I did with the saw and the lovely belt sander there. Well, let's see which end of this looks the best. I can rough that angle in just with a pen, just make it a little bit easier. Anytime I can get some material off, the idea of all carving is to get as much material off in big chunks that you don't have to use a knife. And so that piece, that can come off, and then we'll do a fine tuning on that angle until that's a nice tight fit, and we can make a permanent glue joint there. And even just getting this much material off just saves all that work. If you have this logic down pat, that always get the big chunks off, stuff that you don't need when you're turning a block into a final piece. Okay, so now I need to know, here's my, and I'm going to leave this a little bit longer than it has to be, even though the brake joint will be there. I want to cut this back to here. Now I'm going to leave just even a little bit more because I want to put a final adjustment on that. Now whenever I can get this block in here, see, I'm making a joint here, and I want the joint to be tight as possible, tight as practical. So I can slide this, get this lined up accurately, and I know I'm going to take that material off, that material. Same thing down here. So now I have some of the material that I can get off of this block to bring this before I even make that glue joint. Now I think we have this block trimmed close enough, and we would just tack this in for now, even though we're going to make a permanent, that's going to ultimately be a permanent joint as we carve it. We'll just tack it in for right now. Let me just make sure I have enough material around each side. I'm oversized here, which is what I want. That allows me more freedom to carve that scoop. That's ready to glue in. Now, even though the rest will be tacked, it's right in this middle spot that I want to get a good joint. This is a permanent joint. And since we're going to carve it all the way anyway, as we carve through, what's going to wind up happening is we're going to wind up with a little ridge. But that'll be a little bit of a gap fill there too. Now we'll just let that, that'll be kicking off. Okay, all the layout is done. That's ready for some rough carving. But I'm ready for some more coffee. Hey, we really froze at the field today. That isn't funny. I need another cup of coffee, and then we'll start carving this up. Get a new blade and a knife, and carve away. So now the issue here is I want to continue this shape over, and of course I've removed almost all of the extra material. I wanted to keep this a little bit extra for now because I want to obviously get some kind of a curve in there, and I need to get the spinner blend around here. So none of these things, I can get this piece of tape off now, none of these things are going to be set in stone, and what I want to do is I'm going to take a whole session now and I'm going to start carving. As I start carving, the important thing is I really couldn't cut this out of one block because I want the grain going in this direction. Now, this is one of the hardest things to convince people. Just go get a new blade. Bite the bullet, get a new blade. And I'm going to start with taking a little ice shavings. I know I can't get too close to where that motor is going to be. And it's very similar. This is going to be very similar to many of the other, the Spitfire. Seafire was this way. And it's one of the things, you have a lot of flexibility with this kind of cowling. And most of all, you have that, what I think is a cool shape from inside the circle. As long as you don't paint the spinner black. Oh, what? Boy, that blew me away. Unbelievable. Anyway, Rich and I did talk about an alternative muffler design that we're going to be... Actually, I think he's making it right now. He's going to rush it up to me. But it doesn't matter. It may never get any colder than today. Today was like Eskimo City out there. But little by little, I'll work one side till I have it kind of roughed out. I need to leave that there. I need to bring some of this material around here. And as long as I do it with a new blade and ice shavings, to me this is one of the relaxing parts of modeling. Carving blocks is a very relaxing thing. And it just... I would stop and look at it from several different angles every 4 or 5 minutes until I see what looks like. In other words, this has to come peeled over, this has to come around. We can go a little bit further up here because again we're going to be leaving this. In fact, I ought to get an ink marker and just leave an imaginary scoop here. That's what I ought to do next. This is just eyeball roughing it out kind of stuff because I know this is going to have a curve to it, so I need to get a little bit of a curve. Once I get these, that whole scoop has kind of a curve to it. Then I can flip it using that same reference line. Again, these are really, at best, rough estimates of what that shape is going to look like. And for sure it's going to have more taper in the back, but I don't have that shape yet. Once I get this carved in, I'll know how that back end is going to play out. Now I can start to work this angle. Always better to carve away from you. And start working this curve in. You know, on the way to field today, I always look at those Corvettes parked there, and once in a while there's some other hot cars there. They sell I guess a lot of Corvettes at that dealership. I don't know. But anyway, it's one of the things I have to start really thinking about, the final shape of these scoops. Get some technology going here. And we need a name. We need some kind of cool name for this playing it. Anyway, as that shape starts to come in, then I can start to get a little bit of a vision of what this is going to look like once this is all carved in. Now as I get this side shaped, and again I have to leave a little ridge here. I want to leave a ridge, I don't want that to drop right down yet. So I need to work this curve here, working off of that black line, kind of making it a little symmetrical, in fact. Again, one of my goals is always to minimize the dust in the house for Karen's, well, not actually Karen, for both of our benefit, but this is a big help too. Now I know, for instance, if I look from the front, I can feel with my finger one side's getting fatter than the other. So I ought to just carefully, I guess, start doing this by feel. That's why it's nice to have that relative engine location on there as early as possible. No matter what shape cowl you're doing, that's handy to have on there as you rough this out. And I always like to use my hands to kind of feel if it's coming out symmetrical. Well, let me just look at this from some of the roughing angles. Always good to look at it from a lot of different angles too. I've left a lot here on purpose extra because I don't really know the locations, and this hole is on an angle, so it may wind up that I need more material up here. Well, I'm not going to know until I'm finished with this. Well, after an hour or so of carving, and time to clean up a little bit, and I'm going to attack that over at the sanding bench with the sanding block next. Now what I always have, I have this like a padded up towel or whatever. An ink marker seems to be just about the right diameter to get that little radius in there. And I'm going to spend the better part of this night just trying to rough this out so I can get a rough look at what it's going to look like. What it looks like to me is I need to change this angle back. I want to slant this angle back just a little bit because I'm running out of room up here. And as I get this shape, in other words, I don't want this shape to be a straight line. I want it to have a very gradual curve up into the scoop. So that may have to change a little bit, but certainly not a deal breaker. And I'd like to keep it symmetrical where the joint is so that we can get a real nice cowl fit there eventually. And because this is really the first 90 cowling we've made, I'm not sure what the idiosyncrasies are going to be when we put the motor in and start hollowing it out. But it's this curve when it goes from, and I keep looking at how this is going to look with the spinner on. So I get this, when people go wrong, it's because they don't get this curve in here just right. Well, when I've gone wrong, I should say. And this line here will always have a little bit of a curve in it. If this right here is a straight line, you know you didn't sand it enough, because then the spinner doesn't flow into it just right. At least in the ones I've done so far. And you could vary this diameter with anything round. Just make up a little sanding block. Yeah, it's starting to really just take its own shape, but this is going to have to come back, and this angle I can see already is just going to have to come back ever so slightly. I went over to the belt sander, just took, you can see how much I took off on the back, maybe 1/8 of an inch. Kind of looked at how I want that curve to look. Now, one of the things I want to do, I don't want this to end at I want it to kind of have a swoop and curve up there. Anyway, you got to look at this from several angles. I put the yellow, the ink marker stuff on there with the idea that, well, where's the, let me show this, how it should look, or where it's evolving into. And then, of course, in here, hopefully that big Harley chrome motor. So what I'm going to have to do now, I want to bring this angle in. So this line is going to change here now as I do this. And I'll do it with the rough. I'll lose my edge here. Again, this is a little bit of a give and take here because I have a picture in my mind of how I want this to look. And it really is labor intensive to get one of these scoops. It doesn't jump out exactly what the shape is, especially since I don't know what this is going to look like once the motor's in there. But bringing that in, I don't want to have that straight angle there. And there's a lot of little things in a nose section like this. There's a lot of little angles and edges that if they're not right, it really doesn't have the look that I'm looking for or that I would prefer. This curve is one. If this is a straight line and doesn't have this curve, this whole scoop loses it, to me, loses its appeal. And again, I have something in my mind's eye that I'm working toward, and we'll see if I accomplish it. But this curve is one of them where it can't have a flat there. It's got this edge has to swoop up for this curve to have the look that I'm looking for. And that's where the ink markers come in as a little bit of a, give you a look of what that's going to look like. And the only real way, that spinner, the only real way to envision this is once it's got the spinner on, or from the pilot's point of view what that's going to look like. But I think the real cool thing is when you look in there, you'll see some nice chrome fins and whatever. That's what's going to be the defining feature. And in fact, to be honest, this is why I wanted to have this scoop so big, is I want to see that engine. Like it is on a chopper, this engine is part of the mystique of the whole plane. So we end the first session of working on a nose section here. Not really unhappy with that in any way, and I think that's going to ultimately have the look we're looking for. But we'll come back and work on it tomorrow. Hope everything will be re-energized and warmed up from this day of freezing. Well, this morning we wake up to our first little fuzzy snow of the year. Not much, just a sprinkling, but more is due soon. And I guess that means we're going to work in the shop all day. Oh, the first little spritz of snow of the year. What a pleasant time. More coming. Am I glad? Boy, talk about it looks like a good decision now. What a good decision it was that we got all that ARF testing in when we did. Makes me look like Bill Belichick. Now believe me, it's not that the snow keeps you from flying, but what happens is the field gets so slippery. When the snow stops, you go to fly and everything is slippery as can be. Way too dangerous. So looks like we'll have a couple of days of building while this storm or whatever goes through here. And I've looked at this enough time to know I'm kind of liking the look here. So next step on this, we're going to hopefully get the bottom blocks laid out, and then I'll have the complete profile in one piece to look at. Now it looks like I've got the top pretty much to Gerald's sketch here. Not sure, because we want to lay out the bottom here, and I want to make it oversized so that what's going to happen is this will be bigger than it has to be, and then I can just remove material till I get the shape that I want. Now on a day when it's snowing out there and the wind is howling 30 miles an hour, it's nice to just get into the shop. This is the part of the year that I like the best. Carving, sanding, designing, massaging, I don't know what else. Look at this from a lot of different angles here. But anyway, I like the way the canopy came out. I'm real happy with that. That has the look I had envisioned. And now the bottom, I've got this curve to work on. And there's a critical thing that I learned over the years, and this is critical. If you make a plane, and this is the datum line, and it stays the same width for the whole body, it always looks like it's flying with the tail down. So we always use the number, I always use the number, the minimum of, from this center line, as it tapers back, a ½ inch taper. Then it doesn't have to look like it's flying, I don't know, cockney or whatever. Now we've got a little bit of a taper in that top, so that when it's inverted it has the same look. In other words, it can't be like a pencil. It's got to have a little taper down. Even in the case of a cardinal where it goes straight, a little taper down. When it's inverted, it looks like it's flying straight. There's some of the optical illusions that I've kind of accepted over the years. And then once we get the bottom blocks carved up, and I may be able to do that today, then the biggest thing that we've been waiting to figure out is how do we want to do these scoops. These scoops have been occupying my mind, but needless to say, there's not enough snow out there to worry about. But boy, that coffee, there's something about the coffee on a coffee and modeling in the winter in New Jersey. What a combo. Now one of the things we need to lay out here on the take apart features, I always have the angle back here is always set at about 30 degrees. So the first thing I need to do is lay that angle out. And I'm going to try to work off of the top block here. I guess that's the easiest way. And work off the back of the wing. That would be my first choice here for having that. Because that's going to have to, in fact I got to get a new pen. That angle there is kind of a critical thing, because we need to, when that part is out, we want to be able to get in there and just take the push rod on and off when we take the plane apart and put it back together. And again, getting these perfectly even is going to be one of the critical things I want to do. I'm working off the top there, because I need to transpose that angle down to get where this block is going to end. Now I can put a dot on here. Now I know when I line up my block, let me see which side, I got one side, I can transpose that angle right out onto the block. Okay, now I got the exit point. Now I can reverse this using the datum line, using the top. I want to get an accurate. That's going to be one former of our take apart feature that we have laid out now. Now the trick is to make this block oversized, get this angle, have it just a little bit oversized, and then just nip it in the front until we get a nice tight joint. Now let me just look at, I had one edge, this is the edge I have evened off, because I'm leaving a little bit of extra material up there. And what this tells me now, I know where this is going to wind up ending up. Now the trick here is to get these lines, because that's going to be our take apart feature. Get these lines as accurate as possible. So I'll transpose everything over onto the other side also. And then I'll have two dots up here, connect the dots, and I can cut that off on the belt. Just cut it on a saw and get this angle on the belt sander. I should be relatively accurate that way. Now I know this is the part that's going to be up against the fuselage. I know I have two dots here I can connect. And I'd probably be real smart here to leave, let's see, maybe 1/8 of an inch extra. I'm trying to picture this out, because then we could sand this back. We could sand that back. Leave about 1/8 of an inch extra on there. But that gives me the cut and the belt sander line to work off. Again, what our objective always is to do as little sanding as possible. Just for the fact we don't want to get the dust in the house, so I know I can leave about 1/8 of an inch on here right now safely, just to give me some extra angle to work with. I could probably take some of this off, one of the corners off, just by eye. The rest of it, of course, belt sander will take that off. Okay, now to see how this is gonna fit. And we're a little bit on a plus side, which is what I wanted. Looks like we have a 90-degree angle going across the fuselage, which is just a free bonus. So now I can push this piece right up, holding it just like this. Get it nice and tight. And trace all my angles off so that I know how much of this I can take off before I even tack glue it on. See what I'm doing? I'm working from one end, from the front to the back. And it looks real complicated when you see this all done and all the take apart features, but it's really just one step after another, like climbing a ladder. One step, this piece, and we're fitting them from front to back. So the next step is just go over to the jigsaw, get this off, and then this will be ready to tack glue on. Okay, so the next thing here, now that we've got this trimmed, get it squared up and just tack a couple of drops of thin CA to hold that in place. Now, one of the bad features of doing a take apart plane is at some point in time this fuselage gets very flimsy, because we only have the wood up here. This piece will be missing, and we'll make that piece up, I think, like we did for Miss Ashley. But in the meantime, the block will give us a little bit of support. Even when it's just tacked in place, it gives you some support. Okay, and we just have little dots of CA there holding that in. Now we can start, when we start doing a carving, is matching up this, but I'm still going to take more material off to get this so there's no flat spot on there. I'd like to have a complete curve and bring that curve back. I left everything oversized here. I'm going to be taking this down quite a bit once I get the back pieces on. Now, pretty much what I'm going to do is repeat all the steps for the back piece. I need to get this angle established. Then I need to trace the outer side, and I need to trace that angle in where the rudder post is going to go. But again, it's the technique of doing it front to back that makes it relatively easy. Now I was real careful to take and weigh up all the blocks. This is the lightest one I have. The lightest block on the back. I wouldn't want to use the lightest block for the cowling. The lightest one always goes in the back of the plane. Now I know, because we're using a common 30-degree angle up here, so I won't waste any of this block. It's plenty long, but I can get my 30-degree angles on. Sometimes a really complex operation, or a complex, say building a giant skyscraper, well, if you break it down into enough small steps, and if you know which steps come first, you're way ahead of the guy that mixes the cement before the electrical work is in, or puts the plumbing in before the roof, or just knowing the steps always seems to be a big help to me. And I love to watch one of my favorite guys, Norm Abrams, the furniture guy from the Yankee Workshop, how he lays things out. I wish he'd do a Windy video though, where he really got into the details of it. He kind of skims over too much of it. Now sometimes when I want to get this fit, I'll do the bulk of it on a belt sander, but that last little bit, and because I want this to be a nice tight fit, I can just get the last little bit of the angle, just block sander. And I'm going to work that until I get this to just come together as a nice tight fit. Now it looks like we got, and I'm going to just double check, that's plenty close of a fit. Now we want to just repeat the same thing of tracing around here and getting all of the extra wood off and getting everything beyond the tail post, measure that angle and get all that wood off. And once that's shaped, once that's cut and roughed out, that'll be ready to tack glue in too. And we'll be ready to start carving. Once that's tacked in, then we can start doing our artwork. We can start getting all of those things to blend in. Okay, we're ready to start rough shaping these blocks too. We'll just set up the table, get a nice fresh blade and a knife. This is the part I like. To me, carving wood is a very relaxing thing. A whole lot better than watching Oprah or whatever else is on television now. Rosie O'Donnell and Donald Trump mud wrestling. And the first thing I want to do is starting right about here. I want to see that we have our correct taper, and we do. We need to take about 2/10 of an inch of taper off of the block eventually. But you don't, for no reason at all, do you want this to be the same thickness there as there, or that plane always looks like it's flying tail down, at least to me anyway. And at least to a lot of people that have, I don't know, evaluated this over the years. So the first thing is to even off everything right even here. Get it nice and smooth. And one of the things I think I'll do here, because this is kind of soft, give myself a piece of masking tape to work up against, just in case I get a little sloppy here. Always best, I think, to be safe than sorry. Now it also gives you another choice that's real nice. Is once you have this piece, and it's always going to be a little bit thicker than it has to be. This is what we did with Rich Jacobone's plane. So once we know it's thicker, then when it's finally installed, in essence, and it's glued, you can make this, the thickness of the tape, thinner. Usually get rid of a little bit of weight that way too. Easy if you work off a, at least for me, it's easy to work off a piece of tape. Now some people for sure, they would rather do this with another technique, a plane or whatever, but I think for me, roughing out most of the roughing, and the mistake to make is try to take too much at once. Nice little ice shavings and just keep working it down. Because again, to me, this is a relaxing part. This is not something that, like flying, where you get hyperactive, and this is relaxing. And this just takes just a little bit of time, a little bit of effort, just to get the thickest piece this thick. Now I always like to hold a knife. This is a problem for me, and everything starts walking around. I try to get my finger, and of course avoiding this like the plague. Many times I've gotten my finger in there somehow, and so I'm bleeding all over the thing. But when people have trouble carving, or they're intimidated by carving, usually it's because they try to go too fast. This is going to take a whole session just to rough this out. And if I try to do it in a half a session, well, I'm just going to be unhappy. And Danny Banjock had a great little saying. He said, "I don't enjoy building when I'm rushed." And you know what? I don't either. That's the thing to remember is, it's like a model railroad where you just, speaking of that, we're going to have some friends over for a train running session tonight. But just getting these blocks roughed and not trying to do it too fast and not trying to do big giant slices. And then at the end, I can finish it up with the plane. But the main thing is just to get some relaxation going. Now in my case too, I always have some videos to watch, something that I enjoy. We have that Ravens show coming. I bought that Ravens show, so if you've missed the show that's on public television about the Ravens, give me a hint and I'll send you a free copy, because that is, there's just something there that's, anybody likes birds, and I know Bruce Hunt has a pet bird, and I know Walt Russell has a bird. A lot of people, I'm not sure what that's all about, but a lot of people seem to enjoy birds. And Karen and I certainly are guilty of that. Now, you see, I've gotten up to where I'm almost at the tape. I'll save the last little bit of that for the sanding block when I go over to the sanding table, but now I can match this contour up here very gradually, and then just work my way back, little by little by little, working my way back. And little by little, I'll build it all up, just rough it out till it's this contour right here. Again, what we're doing, working from the front to the back. Now, one little tip, just a little thing that I think works for me anyway, is if you try to drag a knife through balsa wood, and I'll just do a cut that isn't going to matter, and you hold it steady, you get a, I don't know what the feeling is, but it tends to follow the grain a lot more than if you, as you're moving this, now watch, as the knife is moving this way, it's also moving this way. It's kind of like I'm slicing it off. I'm slicing. And it's a little technique when I have to rough out a block. I'm not just dragging the knife through. I'm starting high and ending up low. And I don't know that you don't do that unconsciously, just something that I've done over the years. Because what happens at some point in time now, I'm going to start this ice shaving, where I'm doing this, taking a lot of little ice shavings off. And any carving thing, it just takes time. It's just, if you go watch a guy, they around here, what they do, they take a tree stump and knock it down, and the guy takes a chainsaw and turns it into a bear or a something. And you look at it, it takes a long time. But I guess good carving is like dental work. Step one is it takes time. You've got to relax and you've got to enjoy it. In this case, the test is at the end of this job. If most of the shavings are this thickness, then I know I've done probably a pretty good job. So basically we've turned half of the work table into a chip factory. But now what we did is we have the rough contour, somewhat rough on one side, the other side. Now the hard part is, not a hard part, but is marrying it up so that what I'm saying is one side doesn't have a curve and the other one drops. It has kind of a constant curve for the whole thickness. Front to back, and you basically do that the same way I did the top with a nose by hand. Now this is the part where I try to run my hand on this side and feel the contour. I'm going to work from the front to the back. Try to take small shavings off. Then what I'll do is once I get this roughed out, I'll finish it up with the little razor plane. Any one of the little razor planes, will just put some flats on it. And then after that we'll take it over to the sanding bench and get some of the roughness off of it. Starting to look like what I envisioned, and I'm already coming down to the bottom of the ninth on these side scoops and possibly some scoops on a top block behind the canopy. Again, I've had so many ideas. Every time I drive past those Corvettes, I get more ideas. I said that Ford GT that we saw there not long ago by that body shop. Boy, they had some nice scoops. Anyway, I try to get pictures of all that stuff and all the people that have sent ideas and pictures in. But here in this part of the country, this is what winter's supposed to be like. I mean, we've had 2 months of incredibly warm weather. We already would be 2 months ahead on our building, but we're not racing it, we're not rushing it, and I've encouraged Rich with the Stuka to just lay back and get it done right. He's getting a little panicky, but he's afraid he's not going to have it finished for this season's flying. He will. He gave up his trip to Utah or wherever he goes with his skiing out west so he could work on a Stuka. I think he made the right move. Now, once I get this, I just use my hand to try to get the final fit, and once I get all the way to the back, then I'll start up with the plane. Now, I put a new blade in the plane. Any of the razor planes work fine. I try to hold the plane at about a 45-degree angle. Try to take small cuts. You don't want to have the thinner you can make the cut, the better this is going to be. And I'm going to do the rest of the shaping. And what happens with the plane, it only takes off the high spots. So it helps me now, as soon as I get into this and I start feeling it, to feel right here we got a high spot. No, it's too bad I don't have a pet hamster with all these shavings to give him his Christmas present early. And once it gets flat, then the pieces come off relatively easily. And the more, if you hold it straight, it takes a different kind of cut, about a 45-degree angle. It's that same thing with the blade. Anyway, we're going to spend the rest of this session trying to just rough this out and then put it down by the plan and see if we have that look that we're looking for, that we've gotten from massaging all these drawings and with everybody's input. And boy, that makes it so nice when you have several people looking at something. Everybody spots something different, and usually you wind up what I just think are just a better overall look. Anyway, the more views I get of this, and the more I get that bottom block coming in, I'm really getting excited about working on it now. Now we've got about all of the roughing I can do, realistically here anyway. And I've got to do a little bit better blend on the cowling, but the rest of this I'm going to do over by the sanding bench. I'm looking at it from a lot of different angles here, that I've got the curves that I want. Because I want to have all this shaping done before I even start or even attempt to do whatever's going to happen with those scoops. That'll be interesting, but haven't even thought about how to approach it yet, because my mind has been on trying to get the shapes that I'm looking for roughed in, and I know from this point on I've got to massage this. It isn't like you just carve this in. I'm always going to be looking for that taper in the back, a little bit of taper in the top, a nice blend with a little bit of an upsweep into the cowl. And I think all these little detail things, I hope, like the Testarossa, they're going to add up to be an attractive model. Now I try to put this up on two pads over the sanding blank, sanding box, sanding blade. I don't want the canopy to hit when I'm pressing down. And I want to start with the carbide cutter, just getting out all of the... In other words, the carving marks are taken out by the planing marks, which are taken out by the carbide cutter. And the last thing, of course, will be the sanding marks. And this part goes relatively quickly, but if I want to change, I just want to go up here and kiss this tape. Like, this is in my way here. I wanted to show how quickly the sanding marks disappear. It goes relatively quickly. And then I can get a block with some 220 paper and probably finish it off with 320. And then massage it. The important thing is massage it until I'm happy with all the contours and shapes. See, this one is sticking up too. Now, if you don't have one of these carbide, and this is called permagrit, I think Brodak has them now. This is unbelievable how long this has lasted. This has lasted through probably 5 planes, plus all of making it a molds for other things, and grinding tuned pipes. Just literally never wears out. Les picked this up, and at the time I think he had to get it from Bob Violet, but they're available everywhere now. www.permagrit.com. Anyway, that takes out almost all of the scratches, and we get to where at least now I can feel any deviation in the shape from what I want. I can feel it, and I can make the final massaging on that shape. Now this is one of the final things when I think I've got the shape pretty much how I want it. Get it up on the pads, take a piece of this sticky back. And what this will usually do is pick up any high spots with a scratch. You see a scratch wherever the high spot is. It was a long time coming, but I think we finally got this block somewhat like what I had envisioned. There's still a lot of decisions to be made about how we're going to make the bottom come apart, where the joints are going to be, where the air outlets are going to be, but I think we got the shape that, between all the drawings that we've massaged, we've kindly got it, I think, real close. Now, whenever I'm done with something like this, I like to lay it down by the drawing and get an idea of how close I am. Well, I think we've got it just about as close as I can reasonably expect. let's just hope it doesn't snow for the next week, or we'll get this finished in a week. Now, the next step, I'm going to lay out a little game plan of what I want to do next, because again, the weather is variable from day to day, and if it's going to snow or be way below freezing, we'll probably work in the shop a lot more. Now, one of the things right from the beginning of this project that I haven't figured out yet, been a lot of massaging going on, needless to say. One of the things I really wanted to figure out, and I thought of a tentative solution now anyway, these scoops are going to be the defining feature, one of the defining features. So I really wanted to get that part right. Now, one of the things I really thought about doing in the very beginning was making up a fake fuselage and then just making the scoops before I actually do the good fuselage, the good one. But I thought of another idea. If I look at the top view, and I have that top view, what I can do is make, from the top, I can make the equivalent of like a fake fuselage and just tack glue in some sides, because they're going to see, the problem with this is it's going to have a curve. If this were a straight line, it would be easy to predict what that scoop looked like, but this scoop is going to look something like, no, I'm not really drawing it right. It's going to have, when you look at it, if you're a draftsman, when you look at it from the top, it's going to have one view similar to that, but from the side, it's going to have a different view. And I had thought of, was one of John Cafaro's ideas, in fact. Well, maybe it was Gerald Champ. I don't know. A lot of people have been putting input in here. One of the things I thought we could try, if I make this fake, see, I'll make just the part where this is going to be, make a fake fuselage. And if I don't like it, then I don't have to worry about it. See, but after this is done, if this is the fake fuselage, if I had like half moon sides, so this, from the front view, this would have kind of a curve to it. The inside would have a curve. And I thought, well, ooh, that'd be nice. That'd look pretty cool. That looks a lot like the Lamborghini, in fact, that I was thinking about. But the problem is, I have to know, when I'm done, I have to mold these parts out of something, and then I need to know what this shape is going to look like. And it's probably going to have a little angle back. Well, making up, and right now, because we have the blocks all shaped and hollowed, it may be appropriate to just make this piece up so that I can kind of look at what is going to be the final, is that going to look something like that. Now, it's something that it's a shape that I've used before on Cardinals, where it has a taper to it and everything. This would kind of blend in, and it might or might not have that little bit of a curve. And so from the front, if you look, if you could see both sides at once, it would look like that. So anyway, it's just given me some thought, and I think, because I got a little bit of time here at the end of the session, I thought one of the things I can do is make this little fake prototype up from that drawing that I have. And I only need a section of the fuselage, really, from where the scoop begins and ends. So the first thing I need to do is find the top view and go get some scrap wood. I need to look at that top view, and it's got a very severe curve in it on purpose. So the severe curve accents the scoops. So we actually would like to have this about an inch behind where the scoop would actually be. Let's see, maybe we'll make it 2 inches behind. That'll be easy. We can use the actual piece. And we know the flaps are going to end there, so we want to have an inch or so behind that. So now what this does, this gives me what that thickness is going to be. Actually, from the plans. And since we're not drawing off of these plans, this gives me something to make my little mock-up out of. That's a mock-up of the scoop area. Now we need to go get some scrap wood and make a mock-up fuselage. So we know, for instance, this is the size that we need. Let's get a center line. This is just scrap wood anyway. We always have plenty of wood that's way too heavy for anything else. Let me put a center line right down the middle here. See if it's a lucky day we could find a pennant rights. Now on one side of this, I know it has a taper. Let's see what the taper is. It tapers 1/10 on each side. So what I can do here is just do it this way. Now I need to know the length. Let's see how much it tapers. Okay, now we know it's relatively straight at that point. It has a very slight curve, but not something we have to really deal with. But this is the section of the fuselage. And I just want to start laying some things out and getting some ideas. In fact, I may make more than one of these little prototypes up, since we have no problem. This is the back. So what we have is, in essence, and I'll make two of them, one for the top, one for the bottom. This will set up, and we don't need to make the whole fuselage set. I can just make this the thickness of the scoop. Now I can just make the second piece exactly the same as the first, except I don't need to use the whole piece of wood now. Now this will give me, when I'm done with it, a top and a bottom, and then I'll look for some piece of scrap 1/8 inch this length to make my little mock-up. We have plenty of this wood that's, I'm guessing this is 10-pound wood or something, who knows. And what this is going to just allow us to do, assuming everything goes as planned, we will have a fake fuselage side. And it doesn't have to be real pretty, because I just need to look at how it's going to go and how it's going to go together and what it's going to look like before I commit to cutting that piece of wood that's going to be very difficult to change if I'm not happy with it. Now I made my little mock-up, and what I need to decide now is just how much thickness I have to work with here based on the center line. So I can pretty much reference the thickness that I'm going to have for the scoop right off of the plan. Now I know the one thing I can't do is run that scoop down into the bottom block. In fact, I want to leave about 1/4 inch. So I've got to assume that the most I can go down here is basically 1.25 inches. In fact, I'll make this pretty obvious. Because this is, I need to leave 1/4 inch of material I have to join the bottom block to. So this gives me what amounts to be the center line for that. Let's see what I got to mark the front. This is the front. Okay, so this is the back. And I want to be parallel to the center line. So basically what I need to remember here carefully, and this is just a very crude way to do it, but this is now my bottom block area. And I haven't, actually up till today, I haven't figured out how I really want to do this mock-up. But I'm at the point where I got to start thinking about it. And what I wanted to do is make this box up, and I wanted to think about it tonight. I wanted to give it some time. Now, how much do I have to go high here I need to leave 1/4 of an inch. So I've basically got 1.5 inches to go above the center line. And that would be really pushing it too. So once I make a little sketch here, what it'll allow me to do, and I don't need to do both sides, I just need to do one. And that gives me, and it doesn't matter which is top and bottom. Let's just look at this. This has given me a really, I'll transpose this all onto the other side just so I can look at it. And I know this is going to get flimsy when I cut this piece out, so I ought to put a piece of scrap on both sides just to hold it here. I'm just thinking that may be the smartest way to do this. But anyway, I have pretty much here that area. This gives me the area where that scoop would reside. And in fact, it's a little bit bigger than it should be. I'm going to be leaving some on each side. But this gives me an idea where I could start sketching out my scoop. Just for having a little mock-up, and I want to put those lines on the other side, glue some caps on the end so I have a nice solid box to work with, and then I want to think about this for a while before I cut. Look at a lot of different shapes, think about having some curves in there. This is a lot easier to do it this way than it is to basically cut up the whole plane and then, I wish I did it this way. So the next stop on this little box, the next step, and I'll think about doing that tomorrow, is cut something similar to this out, or whatever our shape is going to be. And now we can experiment on this little part. And again, it's just a piece of scrap wood. I can imagine cutting this out and then saying, I want to put the other way. Oh, and I've done that a million times, of course. Especially with these complex projects where there's a lot of back and forth and a lot of massaging going on. But I think this'll give me something to think about tonight. To give this a thought before I do any cutting, and I can kind of look at this in my head a lot of different ways. I like that idea of putting a curve in there, among other things. Well, scoops, scoops, and more scoops. I have thought about this for about 6 months, so if I screw this up, shame on me. Now in our mail today, this is Jim Rogers. This is his electric ship that he sent us some photos to check out. Now this is a picture of his electric score. I guess it's a take-apart plane here. Or he's got a rack full of them, one or the other. He's made an electric score and his son is flying it. Now, what I'm looking at here is the box. I guess he's able to get the score. It's take apart and electric. Get it in a box. Pretty cool. Now, I could write the caption for this picture. It's probably, that score is a dog. Anyway, we enjoy sharing these pictures. Thanks a lot, Jim. And if you're flying an ARF, you got to be having fun. How can you not have fun? Here's the way he's retrofit the electric motor into the score. ARFs, ARFs, and more ARFs. We just heard from Rich Walbridge. I talked to him on the phone. He's got an ARF and an ARC. He's got both. Him and Walter Hicks must be going in business out there. Anyway, this is from Jim Rogers. This is pretty cool stuff. And obviously, from the look of the background here, he's got a lot of modeling supplies on hand. Anyway, we really do appreciate sharing the pictures. An electric score, now that's pretty cool. That's something that needs to be in control line world. Here's a photo from the Reno Air Races Rich Oliver downloaded for me today. Oh man, tiger, cats. And I talked to George Waters. He'll be coming over in a week or so with the progress on the A26. He's cranking. He's really doing well. Twins, ARFs, 90 ships, electric ARFs. I'm not sure what's left. Now as this day ends, I'm just remembering how many massages we did to this fuselage and how many scoops we made and how many, oh man, how many hours Les even put into that. But we're gonna get back to the shop tomorrow and start working on those scoops. Now this morning, another unflyable day. I was afraid we were not going to get a flyable day, but they're predicting a nice weekend. I wanted to make up a little test part, and I'll make it undersize on this. I'll trace this out, make it undersize, again keep in reference to the center line of the wing, and just get some idea about what that's going to look like in an undersized mode. This is the part that it could take forever to get this to where we're happy with it, but that's why we have, and if we have to, we'll make another prototype, another mock-up, it doesn't matter. I have a famous saying that I always like is paper dollies, and we're going to undersize this some because it's a lot easier to make it bigger than it is to start changing it. And because we don't have a confirmed shape, I can pretty much sketch this just for my first test. Make a paper pattern and get a look at if that's the look I want. And thanks to John Cafaro and Gerald Champ and other people at Les, we've gotten a lot of input, a lot of ideas of how to do some of these scoops and some of these fancy things, but they're all very time consuming. Now if you go back into the early 80s and you check, this is the MIG that was published in Model Aviation. I had a little exhaust that I had molded out of balsa, and everybody at you know, when they'd look at the plane, go, "Wow, check that out!" It kind of snuck up on you, and that was one of the defining little features of that model. In fact, if you looked at them side by side, you could see right through and out. You can see the daylight coming through the other side. Anyway, it was one of the models that kind of had some little unique features in it, and that was the first time I was ever in the top 5 right there. So to me, it has a lot of meaning. But whenever you have, first off, it's always easier to make paper patterns than it is to cut wood on concept things, and it's also easier to cut up a little mock-up, I think so anyway, than it is to, I'm going to kind of just put a curve in this, see if I like that better. Kind of copying the Miss Ashley wingtip shape a little bit. Let's see what that looks like. Yeah, it's pretty close replication. Anyway, and now the thing is to transpose this out on center. We're quarter up on center here. We want to leave a 1/4 inch on the bottom, that's for sure. Leave a little bit of material on the back. Paper dolls. One of the things I learned, and I got some good use out of from Al Raby's videos, was how many times he'd go back and take a rudder and make it bigger, move it, put 2 planes together, move that, change the belly pan scoop. I picked up a lot of little ideas of how to improve my own building from them. So, of course, Al is one of the people that I really think has added a cool dimension to what we do. Now, and it's this curve that's going to be something we look at. So let's just look at how this works out. And I can actually do a different one on each side and then see which one I like. So that was the original, from the original drawing. It's undersized, of course, because we know it's easy to make it bigger, and it's a lot easier. Boy, is it ever easier to cut paper than to just go and rebuild a whole new fuselage. So the first thing is I'll get a brand new blade, and I want to see what this is going to look like in full scale. Now I'm not going to go all the way to the end here. Let's just see how this looks. Again, we're still doing the concept part of this. Whoop, as he breaks the part. Because you got a lot of important little things to decide when you come up with something like this. So, you know, I was hoping I wouldn't break this, but of course I did. So let me put a little drop of glue right here. So I can, and I'll explain what I'm trying to look for. What I wanted to do is just to reinforce this edge, because we know inside of this is going to get complicated when we start cutting away the formers to adjust them. And this is, I mean, I'm sure there's other ways to do a little mock-up, or, you know, you could just run the risk that you're going to get it right the first time. Now, whenever you have this kind of a scoop, where it kind of a Corvette-looking scoop, one of the critical things to think of is how deep this goes in. Now, see, the look changes. It changes dramatically as if you only left it 1/8 of an inch. Well, it still would look like a Mustang does. But as you move this in little by little, the whole look of and you have to kind of have a little imagination to know what that's going to look like. But also now, it's where this piece ends. Now here's the problem with this. Where this ends, I want this to be a razor edge. And I also want this piece to go further in there. So I would, in essence, have to cut this piece out, make a longer piece to make this stick in there. But I had another idea, and I'm gonna give this a try right now as we're doing this, because it's given me one more option I didn't think of, is to leave this piece in here. In fact, one of the things I can do, I can take, see, because I don't want to see this piece when I do this. Here's where I'm getting at. I wanted to either harden this up with thin CA for openers, and I think what I'm going to do is basically devote the whole day here to coming up with some solution to how I want to do this before I cut the model. Then I'll think about it tonight. I'll make the mock-up today, or several mock-ups, until I'm happy. And then what I'll do is, see, by making that thin, that really changes the shape too, because we would obviously put this piece down in here, but it changes the whole look of the scoop. Now, rather than move this piece, the other thought that I had was, I'm going to take a piece of 64th plywood and put a lip in here, kind of a little lip, and I'll cut that off camera so I can give you an idea of what one of my concept ideas is going to be. But the problem is we're coming up on the end of this tape, and I wanted to at least have some idea of how this was going to look before I went to bed tonight. So, and then I could, well, maybe I won't make a decision. I've done that. Maybe I want to make up more boxes, but this is still a good way if you want to invent something. Invent it in a part that you're not married to. Now on this part, what I wanted to do is I wanted to make, see if everybody can follow through with this. I wanted to make a piece. It's got to be oversized, and then I have to sink it into the balsa wood a little bit, because this will eventually get glassed over anyway. So let's see, I want the grain going this way, so I need to trace it out with the piece this way. Now what this does is, if we make this little piece, it's 32nd plywood, maybe we'll want to make it out of 16th, I'm not sure. What we get to do is have a razor edge on this scoop, which adds a lot to it. And I need to bring that up. I need to see where the balsa wood actually ends and just catch it. In fact, I realize right now I should make this a little bit thicker. And see what that does, it allows a little razor edge there that normally there's no way you're going to get this razor edge if it's balsa wood. That's going to be very delicate. And with these guys launching the planes, they're going to be putting their fingers in there and their nose and everything, so that's a problem. So if we went with this, now that's far enough. The only decision we have to get are the pieces, the balsa wood pieces that run along the edge here, and we'd have to figure out what that shape would be. So, and this allows us now to have a giant scoop, a thin scoop. We can kind of open that scoop up, or inside we could put some screening, maybe, like on some of the hot cars have screening in there. It'll make it look like a radiator. So now I need to do, just to see this in real life, Again, everything is easier to do, just a ton easier. Is just inset this. And what that means, just take out a little bit of balsa wood. Tiny amount, actually it's just the amount of this. Relieve that so that that plywood sits down in there, and then block sand this all smooth to get the look. And this is one of the little things. Now I cut around the edge to get this amount of material out, and the rest I'll do with a little piece of sanding block. The idea is to get this so most of that drops down, because it'll be easier. It's better if it's lower. It's better, this should be a little deeper of a gouge, just like when you're setting in a canopy, because you can sand a balsa wood down into it a lot easier. That shouldn't be any problem at all. Now, Bernie Trent sent us these a long while ago, these cut up Bud McKnight sanding sticks, but these are certainly one thing where they're coming in very handy, because again, I want this to sit below. I've got to take this little joint in here. I've got to make it sit below. And when I set that piece in there, I don't want it sticking up at all. I want it to be sitting down. And I've got a little bit more to go. Anyway, this will be one of those little detail things, because when you look in that scoop, in a nanosecond, your eye can pick up anything it doesn't like, anything that's wrong. It can just pick it right up. It's amazing. So for this concept part, I can just picture John Cafaro laughing now. John, we're working on it, baby. Now, what I think the answer will be here is to get some thick CA and kind of float this part. And let's see how this works. Again, I'd like to learn all the little tips I can right here. I'm just trying to make sure that the balsa is higher than the plywood by a tiny amount here. It's not right there. I missed one little spot. I can kind of press it down though for right now. And just let that dry up. Now what's good here is I can fill up that little gap. Just let the balsa dust sit in there and run some thin CA in there and build it up relatively quickly. Just leave the dust in there and run thin CA in there. Now at some point when we get it, you can see there's just little divots there, and because we're not looking to make this a real part, we're not real fussy, it's the view I want to look, it's the look, whatever. This is always a good idea at the very end. When you think you're close, just harden up the whole area. The same way we do on a lot of the other construction parts where we want to blend finishing materials. And a couple of coats of thick CA, and I think we'll have that blend, and that really defines that edge. I mean, that really gives us an edge that nobody's going to hopefully put their finger in. And I'm wondering and thinking, if I glass this and then silk span it, that edge is going to be like a really defined razor edge that I want to see. Now, then I also, with the parts that I'm going to put in here, I can define how thick I want that to be. Do I want it to be really big? The real scoops look like they're probably a 1/4 inch or so, especially on the Enzo. I'd be thinking a 1/4 inch back there. Maybe ultimately some screening back there. Something that looks like a radiator. Now, as a little, just to fill in some of the little divots there a little quicker, I just put some light spackle in there. Now I want to lay out the edges of this. And I'd like to do it with 64th plywood because I'd like to have that defined edge, and the plywood will give me that edge. Now the idea here is I'm going to try something. I'm going to make a kind of a pie cut. Let's see if 64th plywood's going to work. First we need to get a straight edge. Now what I thought I could do is just put a constant angle triangle in here and then slide it in. Which side did I just cut? Then just slide it in. That's not the straight edge. Okay, see if I do this, if I make a constant angle, then I can just use as much of this as I need. And I'm hoping this is going to work because number one, it's going to give me that edge that I want. And I need that edge. See how this works. See, now the trick would be to trim this to the length we need. In fact, we could leave it oversized, we don't even care. Now the only thing I don't like about this whole thing is this piece doesn't go deep enough in here. So now what this is telling me is something very important. If I'm going to use this type of scoop, I have to make this piece longer, and I don't know how much longer I have to make this. This is why you do a mock-up. But I don't think we're going to finish it on this particular DVD. But this is where we're at. I'm going to have to think about this a little bit, and we'll pick this up on the next DVD. We got a lot of... This is something that's just going to take a lot of time. Look at this.